Welcome to Spring Office Hours, Season 3, Episode 11, a first look at Spring Boot 3.3 and Java 22. My name is Dan Vega, Spring Developer Advocate at Broadcom, joined by my good friend and colleague, DaShaun.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm hanging there. We're having a day. It's cold outside. I'm in North Dakota, but it's a great time to be a Spring developer.
It is, and it's the first day of spring has passed, so I'm wearing my spring green polo today to celebrate that momentum. Yeah, so cool. We have a fun episode today. We're going to talk about Spring Boot 3.3. Not out yet, but 3 milestones have passed now. So release candidate milestones. So we're going to look at those today and kind of see what's coming in 3.3. We'll probably do another episode when 3.3 is released and really dive into it. But somebody asked me last week, hey, what's coming up in 3.3? And I'm like, I haven't really jumped into that yet. So I've been so focused on 3 and 3.1 and 3.2. So it's time to start looking ahead to that.
It is.
And Java 22 was released last week. So it's a good time to kind of take a look at that. Going to have some fun with that today.
We get a Java release party every 6 months, and we get a Spring Boot release party every 6 months. This is just, it's fun. So, we had the Java release party last week, and now we are 6 weeks away from the spring release party. That's a great, every 7-8 weeks we're gonna get a little party. Like that's the life I want to live. This is great.
Yeah, I had some interaction on Twitter about Java's release cadence, and somebody threw out there why do we keep moving so fast? I love the days when Java 8 came out and all these cool features came in. I'm like, I have the exact opposite feeling because that took 4 or 5 years to get out. Now every 6 months we get a new release and some new features, some new performance improvements, security improvements. I'd much prefer this cadence over that one. So I don't care about the number versioning. I don't care if we get to Java 50. If we do, that's a good thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. Software. The thing is, business is moving fast. The world is moving faster. It is not 2010 anymore. It's not the 90s. The way that we deliver things are completely different today than the way that we've delivered them in the past. And you have to keep up, period.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it. You have to keep up.
So we are live streaming here on YouTube. You can join us every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to go ahead and join in the fun. If you are in the live chat, I see a bunch of you here already saying hi. Let us know where you're from. If you're not in the live chat, we go ahead and turn this live stream into a podcast. You can find it on all the podcast networks. So go ahead and check us out. Take us on the run. Take us in the car. I just heard a great story about somebody who enjoys us in the car every week. They look forward to this podcast. So that makes me really happy.
It makes me smile. And Edu, I just want to say thank you for being here, but also thank you for all the work that you do for the community and getting Edu was responsible for getting the Java 22 releases into SDK Man, which I love. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so as soon as it hits SDK Man, it's really here. Now I can just run SDK, install Java, and pick my version. So
yeah,
cool. So what have you been up to? Anything fun last week?
So here's my character flaw. And I'm clear of it and I'm aware of it. I have a hard time doing things and not getting them to production. So we talked about Spring Batch and what we're doing. And one of the things that I did, we had this new Spring Office Hours repository, and I told you, kind of the project is. But I took it and I refactored it a bunch. That's what I've been doing. I listened to Josh Long's Spring Boot. No, he's getting started with Spring Batch, I think, on YouTube. There's a whole series of them, 7 or 8 episodes. But I listened to that during my travels, and then I did a lot of refactoring. So now I've got this nice thing that's a nice little pattern that we can use. And for example, we can go and we can get the metrics on these GitHub repositories that we've delivered to the Spring Office Hours, and it runs as a batch. It's just a really good example of something that should run as a batch. It doesn't need to be running all the time, and we can run it and it gets this valuable data. And I've loved it. I love that. And now I have something that's worth showing, but that time of, I want to get it to production. I want to make it good so that everybody here can go and look at it as a good example. I don't want to say oh, hey, don't do this at home. No, here's the best example that I can do in the amount of time that I have to give you a good spring batch example that you can go and play with, and you can find something else that fits. So that's what I've not that.
Yeah, and as we always say, if you can find something that you're interested in that's personal to you, like one of your kind of side projects, to play around with a new tool or a new framework, like that is one of the best ways to do it because you're interested in it. You want to build something with it. So yeah, that was really cool to see. Okay, cool. So thanks for everyone for joining us here. Please get your questions in. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I want to share a couple of things that I was up to. The girls had a little Easter egg hunt last week. This is on my newsletter. So if you want to, danvega.dev/newsletter, I wanted to point out a couple of things. I was in Atlanta last week and I was there for the Atlanta Java user group. That was really cool. That was one of I always saw the pictures online from Glenn, our friend Glenn in Atlanta, and Pratik and Vince. And I saw the pictures and I was like, oh man, I always want to I want to visit the Atlanta Java user group one day. I was able to get there last week. Before the meetup, I was able to meet Neil Ford, who is an author and a speaker, and many of his books are on my bookshelf. So if I would have known he was going to be there, I would have taken some books and got them signed, but that was really cool for me to meet Neil, and he was awesome. So it was good chatting with him. Got to see my good friend Glenn, got to sit down with him a little bit before the meetup and talk to him. And look at that room. That is amazing. They have this really great production quality here, and everyone came out for it. I think there was 80 people for a meetup, which is awesome. I talked about Spring Boot 3. We had a lot of slides and a lot of live coding, a lot of really good questions. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. I then the next morning at 9 o'clock had a O'Reilly training with our good friend Nate Chuda, and I had to do it from the hotel room. So here's my little traveling setup to do a 4-hour training. I was like, I don't know if the hotel Wi-Fi is gonna hang, but
that lamp looks really familiar. I don't know where I've seen it before.
Oh my, you must be in a Marriott.
Yeah, that whole setup looks very familiar. For those that are listening, I'm looking at a picture of his hotel room, and I'm looking at the exact same setup that I'm sitting at right now. So yeah,
that's awesome. One other thing, over the weekend, I crossed 50,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is just insanity. I think two career goals that I've had that I was these are the two things that I think are going to define my career. One is become a Java champion. We've crossed that. 2 is get to 100,000 subscribers. And yes, I'm far away from that, but trust me, it's a lot harder to get from 0 to 1,000 than it is from 50,000 to 100,000. Now it's more of just a consistency and showing up and putting out good stuff. So that was so cool. And I'm just, for the people listening, we went out to dinner that night at one of our favorite restaurants, and they made this little card for me and a little dessert. So that was, it was such a fun weekend. So,
oh, wow. That's fun.
So yeah, that was my week. That was awesome. What do we got next? Calendar.spring.io. If you don't know about Calendar, this is a really good place to find out what is happening in the Spring ecosystem, what is getting released. I can see a lot of things happen last week, one of which is Spring Boot 3.3.0 Milestone 3. So that means there are 3 milestones in place, and that is one of the things we're going to talk about today. We also have a couple releases this week on Spring Cloud, Spring Cloud Stream, Spring Functions, Stream Applications. I don't even know what Stream Applications is. Do you?
No, not off the top of my head.
That's a
I
new
think
one for
that I
me.
do, but I'm not worth saying.
I'll have to look at that. So
yeah, maybe we should talk about that on an upcoming episode.
Maybe. All right. Oh, Stream Application. So I wonder if it's just Spring Cloud Stream, something to do with Spring Cloud Stream. So
yeah.
Cool. So that's a calendar. Anything else? You got anything else, or you want to dive right into today's topic? You got any questions coming in?
No, no questions. And yeah, we had an answer. Examples of Spring Streams. Fantastic. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah, appreciate it. Oh, Donald. Hello, everyone. Dan, loved the AJUG presentation and in Atlanta last week. Donald, Thank you, Donald, so much. Donald's a newsletter subscriber, so he knew I was out golfing the previous week. It's really cool to like see people in the wild who are like watching our show, reading the things that we do, doing all the things. So that is
on that, I am sometimes like we get to have these conversations with people out in the wild, and I am never bored. I am never not excited about hearing what people are doing. So when we get to go to a jug, I'm traveling right now, and one of the first things that I do is like, hey, is there a jug in the area? Like, is there a community that I can reach out to? Is there a meetup that I can go to? But when we don't have that, I want to encourage everybody that's here. Like, there's no story that's too small. I love to hear like, hey, we upgraded from 2.6 to 2.7. That excites me. Yeah. I love hearing that. And I would love to hear more of the stories that you're doing. I saw Donald on Greg Turnquist's live stream.
Yeah.
So hi, Donald. I feel like I know you already.
Yeah. Donald and I were talking about Greg in Atlanta. So yeah, pretty cool to like see all the pieces kind of connecting to each other when we're out there. So, and that's why, like, as much as the pandemic, when we kind of transition to all these virtual talks, it's easy to give a talk from home. Like I can sit here, we're talking to 200 people right now, so that's great. But you kind of miss that like connection and talking to people in real life and like seeing the person on the other side. Because right now I don't. I know a few of you, but I don't know everybody in the chat room. So that is always awesome. And yeah, just seeing like 80 people in a Java user group, that was just awesome. So cool.
Yeah. A different day. It's a different time. We do things different. We've learned a few things, and yeah, people like to spend time with their families. Who knew? People like to stay at home and spend time with their families. So to get 80 people at a jug, that's a big deal, especially in the, it's 2024 and things have happened, things have changed. That means something very, very special. There are conferences, that would love to have 80 people sign up. There are conferences that don't have that type of attendance. So that is, it's a joy.
Yeah. So hats off to the Atlanta Java user groups. They are one of the best. That was awesome. Okay. Before we get into today's topic, I have one other thing on here. I think I have it on my speaking page. I have a talk coming up on Thursday with our friends at IntelliJ. If you want to learn how to build intelligent applications with Spring AI, kind of putting the final touches on that presentation. I'm excited about it. It's a general intro into AI in general. Like, here's some of the terms that you're going to hear thrown around. Let's talk about those, and then let's learn how to build AI applications with Spring. And Spring AI is one of the new projects in the ecosystem. If you're not familiar with it, definitely check it out. It's really cool. It's moving fast, and it's doing a lot of really cool things. So I'm excited to show that off. You can sign up here for free. And let me see if I can get that.
While you're doing that, I'm going to say hi to Jonathan again. We are so lucky to have folks from the Spring team. They're here. So I want to say, hey, ask your questions, and we might not get to it here, but we have the chat going if you're live because Jonathan's here. And I also want to say one of the things that I'm focusing on going forward is getting more a deeper understanding of observability and how the observability story fits into all of the projects in Spring. We're doing a lot more event-based, event-driven architectures these days. And the observability part is going to be really important. As you go forward, right? You're going to have a different set of things that you're looking for and different ways of keeping track of that. So I'm happy that Jonathan is here. And
speaking of Jonathan, him and I talked at Confu about a little project we might be working on. I already talked to you about it, but we haven't said anything about it. So Jonathan, I need to ping you, and we need to get on that because I think it's going to be special for this community. So
and for this community, if you don't know, the Tea House project is like my go-to. If you want to get a first pass at an easy project to go and understand some of the features that are available in the Spring ecosystem and how observability can play a part, go check out Jonathan's Tea House project. I'll put the link in the show notes.
Absolutely. All right. So today's topic, Java 22 and Spring Boot 3.3. I figured we'd start with JDK 22 because that came out last Tuesday. And we'll just take a look at what was in that. And I may jump into the release notes as well. Actually, first, I want to show off, if you go over to dev.java, they had a watch party, a live stream.
Were you there? Did you watch it?
I watched some of it. It's actually like almost 5 hours long.
Yes.
So I didn't get a chance to go through all of it. I kind of started back at the beginning, but I was able to like skim through and watch some of the highlights. I really want to go sit down and like watch all of it, but I haven't had a chance to. It was awesome from what I saw. Some, like, in depth on like all the features, right? So if you leave this stream or this podcast and you want to like watch some in-depth tutorials on like everything that was in JDK 22, this launch stream was awesome.
It was.
So from a JEP perspective, so JEP stands for JDK Enhancement Proposal. These are the things that are going into that particular release. Each JEP, if you kind of dive into it, has a really good explanation. If you want to nerd out, these are like the really good, the first place to start, because it gives you a summary, it gives you some goals. Hey, what was the motivation behind even introducing this feature, right? They give a lot of background, and there'll be some code examples in there if there needs to be. And a lot of, I think one of the most important parts is like, hey, this is what we were not trying to solve for here. So this is the scope of this particular JEP. So what we have here is region pinning for G1, statements before super, which is a preview mode. So if you want to include some statements before a call to super, foreign function and memory API. This, I think, was one of the bigger ones here in JDK 22. The class file API is a preview. Launching multi-file. So I'm only going into depth into a few of these because it's still pretty new for me too. The launching multi-file source code programs. This is in there. It's not a preview. It's available. This is really cool because before, if you had like a Java file and it just had like a couple of statements in there, you could easily just run it from the command line using Java, right? You could say Java application and it would run it. It'd basically compile it for you and then execute it. But if you had calls to other classes and brought in other libraries, it wouldn't compile multiple source files, right? So this is saying, hey, if you're in an application and it needs to call something else and it needs to bring in a library, it can now compile that now with just that Java keyword. So this is one of those things that if you're kind of just getting started and tinkering and want to just test things out, this makes it really easy to do. So I was excited to see that one. String templates. This is a second preview. Again, I have not dived into this one yet, but I believe what I heard was there was going to be some changes in this. I don't know what the changes are yet.
Yep. Ted just said that in the chat. Interesting potential changes being discussed for string templates. So don't get too attached to the current preview.
Right. Yeah. And I know that when string templates were first announced, everybody kind of looked at them and goes, oh, I don't like that syntax. But the more I heard the reasoning behind what they did that for, and not, being able to be backwards compatible, right, was a big thing. It made more sense to me. And other languages, like whatever the languages that Apple uses, I can't think of it off the top of my head. Yes, Swift does a very similar thing. I got used to it, and it wasn't that bad. So, yeah, what is JitterTid saying? The backlash curly brace syntax will not change, though. It's more about how you invoke it. Okay, so good. So the kind of syntax is going to stay the same. There's just more how you're going to invoke it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of string templates. When you combine them with like multi-line strings, just really makes everything kind of less verbose and easier to read, in my opinion. So that is string templates. That is in a second preview. And again, we always talk about, contributing to open source. This is a really good example of that. If you want to help out at the Java level, these things that are in previews, what they're really asking us to do is take these for a ride, use them in a program, test it out, and find issues with it, or just provide some feedback and say, hey, I tried this out. This is what I liked. This is what I didn't like. the JDK team is listening and helping evolve that. And so that's what those previews are for, to get them into a build but not ready for production. We have Vector API, which is in its 7th incubator. Again, this incubator and preview kind of different. There's a lot of stuff going on with the Vector stuff.
So let me pause it. When we say preview in JDK, I hear it, and I put it in the same bucket as Milestone in Spring. And when I hear incubator around the JDK, I still think of like experimental.
Yeah.
In Spring language. So yeah. Is that the same for you?
Yeah. And then the preview is like, hey, if I grab the bits, then I can at least test it out. I have to use this flag, and I can use it. And I've known features that we were using in production before that were preview ones that were like, okay, this is probably not going to change. This is pretty close. Let's just go ahead and use it. So if you use that flag, but yeah, I consider it the same. So
here's another thing is like, software is soft for a reason. You've heard me say that before. There's going to be things that change. And the idea of, hey, I'm going to take a preview to production. I'm going to use these Java 22 preview features in production. Guess what? Java 22 is going to be around and it's going to be maintained for the next 6 months. So I'm in good shape. But when Java 23 comes around, if those things leave, that's okay. I can go back and change it. I don't have to commit. And it's okay to go back and review and make changes. And you're going to find out when you try to upgrade from Java 22 to Java 23 that maybe those preview features are gone, but you're going to have a path forward, right? Just because there's some additional language capabilities, new features, you should not be losing any functionality, right? Your Java might have to do things a different way. That's okay. Don't be afraid to try new things, to go forward. Be aware that the ecosystem is changing quickly. We're going to get changes every 6 months. Know that, so that you're not committing to anything for more than 6 months. You're going to be okay by taking a preview.
I love Jitter Ted's comment here. It says, use the preview features and provide feedback. Otherwise, you can't complain about it later.
Well said. I couldn't have said it better. Well said.
Cool. Another JEP here is JEP 461, Stream Gatherers. This is in a preview, and this is really around enhancing the Stream API to support custom intermediate options. I really like some of the examples in here. So again, read through the motivation. Here are the things that got us to this point. Here are the changes that we are making. So now we have a Stream Gatherer. So again, this is a really good place to kind of dive into these. We are trying to do this as a high level within 30 minutes. There's a 5-hour video on dev.java that jumps into a lot.
And that 5-hour video has a section for each one of these JEPs, and you get the insight from the people that were behind the work that was done. So so call back over to that 5-hour overview. We're just here to talk. What are your favorite features as you look through these JEPs? Like, is there anything that jumps out to you as like, oh, I'm excited to take that for a spin? I know what Simon's is.
Yeah, I'm going to list the next 3 out. These are all previews. So structured concurrency and scope values, 462 and 464. These are in a second preview. I was hoping they were going to land in JDK 22. These are part of Project Loom. So we already had virtual threads land in JDK 21. These are some other things that you're going to come across when working with virtual threads, right? So structured concurrency, scope values, those are important. Those are in a second preview. Again, probably just getting more feedback on those, making sure they're right. And I'm hoping these land in JDK 23, so we'll have them this year, which is exciting. And then the last one, implicitly declared classes and instance main methods. This is in a second preview. This is the JEP that allows you to write a little bit less verbose application file. And this is really meant for people getting started with the Java language. You get dropped into this application class, and it has, class, application, and then public static void main. You take in a string array of args, then you print something out. Like, there's a lot of ceremony going on there just to kind of get started with it, right? Now, what this does is kind of shorten it down. You can just say void main and start writing some code. So that's exciting.
was like, hey, like when you come into Java, like, why do you have to do all these things? They said, don't worry about it now. You'll learn about those later.
Yeah.
This is to solve that.
Yeah, and behind the scenes, it's actually turning it into a normal class file that we're used to reading, but again, just easier to get started with. So I'm excited about that. I've done some content around that. But yeah, hopefully that will make it into JDK 23 as well. So yeah, exciting. The work on JDK 23 has already kind of begun, so you can kind of take a look at that. And yeah, so those are the JEPs. This is a really good place to start to understand what's included. Another place to start, I'm not going to go through this, but there is a section on release notes. So it talks through like some of the JEPs again, but if there are anything that don't belong to a JEP, it will include those in there as well. So there's like a deprecated method for JFR. I'm just looking through here. Supported Unicode, foreign function memory, PI. These are all the release notes. So this is the JEPs plus more. So this is a really good chance to kind of dive through there and take a look at what's new. So, again, I'm still pretty new to this too, both Java 22 and Spring Boot 3.3. I haven't had a chance to really take anything for a ride. So that's on my list of like things to do.
Fantastic. What's one thing that we know about Spring Boot 3.3?
Well, let's back up one thing. Let's start here. Did you know if you go over to start.spring.io, you have a Java 22 selection now, so you can start using it in your Spring applications. For me, that's really exciting because that's a way I can like start to play around with some of this stuff, especially like those stream gatherers as a preview. I think that would be fun. That would be something I would start using right away. So
I think our audience that where I focus a lot of time in is on the native images and on these runtime efficiencies. I like to deliver things on Raspberry Pis. And one of the things that I'm already running into is there are some changes around the native processing released. And I'm not sure yet if it's specific to a certain JVM, but I'm having some projects that we're running on Java 21 as native images. I'm having some difficulty getting them to run with Java 22 as native images, and I'm still exploring that. So this is just kind of a heads up that it might not be as easy, and we might have some things to learn, but you have an opportunity to learn with us, and we'll definitely share updates with that as soon as we understand it better.
So from SDK, man, that's one way that I really like to kind of manage my different SDKs. You can get JDK 22 from the different vendors, and GraalVM JDK 22 is available now as well, right? I think I saw that. I haven't installed that yet, but
so the GraalVM, the way that Oracle's GraalVM does native images, there are some significant differences in the results between some of the other vendors. So I use Liberica's NIC in order to get the native capabilities. And right now there are significant differences between the two. So yeah, we've got some discovery to do, and I'm sure that those things will be ironed out soon, and we'll share more details here, but there are some changes. So if you're running into some issues, be aware. And if you find a solution, we'd love to hear about it. But yeah, be aware. Be on the lookout if you're doing native images.
Yeah, Edu is in here. SDK install Java 22 open or SDK install Java 22-Graal CE or Graal. Just for those out there, what's the difference between Graal CE and Graal? One's the community edition, right?
Correct. Yeah, and that's a question that has come up quite a bit. It's like, hey, if I do these native images and it's from Oracle, and are there any risks here? Like, can I do the native images? And yes, there is a commercial edition of Graal, the NIC, the piece that does the native image pieces. But there's two things when I say GraalVM. There's the Graal JDK, which is a JVM written in Java by the Oracle team. And there's also that NIC, that native image compilation piece that does the conversion of bytecode into native image code. So there's two kind of things that fall into the picture into my head when we say Graal. So one of the concerns is like, hey, is that what if it gets taken away? Should I not do the native? Why would you not want to do the native images if you've got a use case that's going to save you money or give you better performance? If things change, and things will change, it's okay. Don't be afraid of something that's not on the radar, that's not about to happen. There are no warning signs that this is going to ever go away. They have provided a community edition and a commercial edition if you need even more, value out of these deliveries. But yeah, the community edition is amazing, and it's a massive performance boost. And you did a recent YouTube video on this as well. You cannot argue with the benefits for some of these applications. You cannot argue with the value that you get by using what we get with the GraalVM native images.
Yeah, and just thinking about that, we talked a lot about runtime efficiency last week in Atlanta, and a couple things that came up. One of which is virtual threads, right? So virtual threads is just, we talked a lot about these are all just different ways to get our different workloads into production. And I had an interesting question, and I thought I'd share it here. So if you're using virtual threads, I talked a lot about the new REST client. And hey, this is a nice way to talk to whatever applications over HTTP, right? And someone asked, well, if I want to use virtual threads, do I need to rewrite from REST template to REST client? And I was like, oh, that is an interesting thought, because you're thinking REST template is blocking, but so is REST client. So how does it use virtual threads? And no, you do not. I always say, don't rewrite your old code just to move from REST template to REST client. REST client for me is if I'm writing a new service, I'm going to reach for REST client now because it's just fluent, it's intuitive, it's easy to read. But both of them are blocking. But what happens is underneath the hood, it's actually using some type of client to make the call. You can configure that, but by default, maybe it's using the JDK client, or if you can switch to the JDK client. That is what is actually figuring out if it needs to be a blocking call or what it needs to use. Is it using a virtual thread? Is it using a traditional thread? So no. So even though those are blocking clients, it's the underlying actual functionality of making that HTTP call that ends up using the virtual threads. So yeah, that was interesting. I got some really good questions around that. So
don't convert to REST client if you're already using REST. You don't need to convert to REST client in order to get the benefits of virtual threads.
Right. But yeah, I mean, and the REST client for me is just easier to use, right? Easier, right? If you want to rewrite some of the stuff from REST template to REST client, go for it. Someone asked, is there a open rewrite recipe for that? And I said, I don't think I've seen one, but there, one of the ways that you can do this too. We looked at a lot of the recipes on the open rewrite site, and I said, this isn't the only place to get them. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. One way that I look for recipes is in GitHub. I just scan GitHub for recipes. There are other collections out there that you know of where to find rewrite recipes?
So what I've noticed, and I'm trying to think of what library it was, and I just found one recently, where the libraries are putting these collections of recipes together inside of their GitHub org.
Nice.
And some of them have not made it up. So yeah, what I'm convinced of today is that these recipes are going to continue to grow, and the open rewrite landscape is going to continue to grow and move forward. I am convinced of that. Whether or not these libraries kind of pull up into an open rewrite catalog, I'm not sure. There's some momentum. We saw the same thing. It's kind of a similar bucket of the metadata, the reachability metadata that you need to create a native image, right? And there was a lot of work done to get that reachability metadata into a single, place so that we could easily find it. And yeah, it would be wonderful if that same thing happened for open rewrite. And maybe that's kind of a call to action for library writers.
And I like what you said. Some of the libraries are maintaining their own recipes. So if you look at other examples in there, like the migration to 3.2 or whatever, that's just a collection of a bunch of different recipes. So you can easily build your own recipe to include all of the things that you care about in your organization. So yeah. Big fan of rewrite.
In the future, instead of writing migration docs, libraries and frameworks might write migration recipes, where it's just simply, here, apply this recipe to your code to get to 4.x or 5.x. And yeah, that's the future that I want to be a part of. I would much rather, when Jonathan gives me a new library that has breaking changes in it, I would much prefer that Jonathan give me a recipe that I can simply apply to get the benefits of those new features. That's the future I want to be a part of. So that's what I'm trying to do.
I was just going to say that same thing. That's a future that I want to be a part of. So cool. I got another question here. Is the HTTP interface in Spring Framework for creating REST client good? Can I use it in place of REST client or REST template? The answer is yes. So especially in Spring Boot 3.2 and above, it is using the REST client underneath the hood. So you no longer need to bring in something like Webflux to use that. And yeah, if you don't need a ton of customizations and you don't need like full control over it, you're just writing an abstract method for every one of your calls to this other service, and Spring's turning that into an implementation at runtime. So absolutely give it a test ride. Yes. I've been showing it off a lot, and everybody's really interested in that. So cool. All right, let me get back to our screen share here and start taking a look at some of the things in Spring Boot 3.3. So again, from every milestone release, you'll see some release notes, and it'll just talk about things that have changed. Here's things that are new and noteworthy. And we're just going to talk about these. Again, I haven't gone through this that much, so we're going to talk about it together. So in 3.3.0 milestone 1, again, we're on 3, so this is 2 back. Observability improvements. So we've talked about this since 3.3. One of the major themes in 3.3 was observability, and this was going to continue in the 3.x line. I think every release we've had, even point releases, there have been something around observability, whether it's in Spring Framework or Spring Boot or one of the other projects in the ecosystem. So maybe Jonathan can chime in about this, but support for the @span tag annotation has been added. That's exciting. So we have some Apache Pulsar improvements, Spring security improvements. A JWT authentication converter is now auto-configured if one of these properties are set. So instead of having to like bring that in yourself, you can just say, hey, set one of these properties, and that's now going to be auto-configured for you.
The Spring security team has continued, right? There's so much flexibility, and they continue to find these shortcut patterns to simplify what we've been taking to production. So yeah, they're continuing down that path of kind of having a simple and easy button to do some of these patterns that are the most popular.
Yep. We talked about virtual threads. The Undertow web server is now using virtual threads if enabled, so that's cool. We have
Jonathan has a comment here around observability. Jonathan is asking, and now I'm asking on behalf of Jonathan, try out the process info contributor.
All right. So it can be enabled with management.info.process.enabled equals true. And you get this nice info contributor. So cool. That's exciting. We have some dependency upgrades. So these are kind of noteworthy. If you're using Spring Boot 3.0, you are getting Spring Authorization Server 1.3.0. You're getting Spring Security 6.3.0. You're getting Spring Session 3.3.0. These are important because if you're using something like Spring Security and you move to Spring Boot 3.3, you need to know what's not just changed in Spring Framework, but now what's changed in Spring Security, right? And then a whole bunch of numerous libraries were updated. And then we have some miscellaneous things. I'm just kind of digging through here. Webflux, configuration processor. Oh, that's nice. The configuration processor now checks the additional Spring configuration metadata.json for superfluous keys and fails if it encounters any. Execution context serializer, the started log messages. Cool. So that's really it for 3.3.0. Again, once we get to a release, that release is going to be a combination of all these kind of release notes. So we have 3.3.0 Milestone 2. Here are some things if you're upgrading from Spring Boot 3.2, something to do with Jersey observability. So check that if you're upgrading. Minimum requirement changes. If you're using the native build tools to build your project with GraalVM, make sure you're using at least version 0.10.0 of the plugin. So yeah, if you can't just change the version in your Palm, you need to make sure you change the Maven plugin there.
Here, just for our audience, there's a sneak peek to 3.3.0 RC1 from Jonathan Ivanov. You heard it here first. We are working on adding Prometheus Client 1.x support.
Ooh, wow. That's going to be awesome.
I feel like I'm in the know. Thank you, Jonathan, for that insight. And
that's
again,
awesome.
I'm on that ride. I'd like to do a lot more and kind of help better tell that story. And again, since Spring Boot 3 and actually Java or Spring Framework 6, observability is important. It has the priority of what we're doing has changed, and we realize that. So there's been a lot of changes, and those changes continue to get better.
Yep. So new and noteworthy in M2 was the support for Apache ActiveMQ Artemis. So now a service connection support for Artemis has been added. This means the test container support that works with the Artemis container, the Docker Compose support that works with ActiveMQ Artemis image. So support for that, that's awesome.
I'm gonna, I went down this path around test containers where I was like, I don't want a Docker Compose in my repository. And I will tell you that my recent work I've changed my mind. So for all of you that I said, don't get rid of your Docker Compose, just use the test containers and have that application test or that test application instance that you could run locally. I've changed my mind. I'm back to using both. I use test containers in that what I get out of the start.spring.io initializer. So I have a test application that I can run that implements the test containers. But I'm also now using a Docker Compose. And yeah, I've flipped. The test container ecosystem continues to get better. And I'm using it more and more. And I'm realizing now that I need both.
Yep, I'm using both as well. So big fan. What is this for the Bitnami container images? The Spring Boot support for Docker Compose will detect and configure containers for Bitnami in addition to official images for several others supported technologies, including Cassandra, Elasticsearch, MariaDB, MySQL, Mongo, Neo4j, Postgres, RabbitMQ, and more. Some more observability. I mean, Jonathan, you guys are busy so much every release.
Absolutely.
So we have stuff around Spring Pulsar, around Brave and Zipkin. Brave has been updated to 6.0, Zipkin to 3.0. So some new upgrades there. A new JDK HTTP client-based Zipkin sender has been implemented. So this sender only depends on the JDK and will be the default sender in Spring Boot 3.5.0. So interesting there, and kind of introducing that. Virtual threads, we talked a lot about that. If an async task executor is available in the context, it is now registered on the WebSocket channel registration. If using virtual threads, this will usually be a virtual threads enabled simple async task executor, making WebSockets virtual thread capable. So that's great.
Thank you. That sounds great. That sounds awesome. Yeah. That's like one less thing I have to worry about when I'm doing async work with WebSockets. Like, fantastic.
A batch transaction manager annotation has been introduced to make it easier to configure Spring Batch to use a custom transaction manager. So we just talked about Batch last week. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about Spring Batch, check out last week's episode.
Yeah, I'm now excited to take a look at this Batch transaction manager.
Yeah,
I'm glad that we're doing this.
I got a question here. I figure I'd just pop it up real quick. Is Java FX still relevant? Absolutely. Yes. They're doing a lot of work on Java FX.
So the question that came up last week with this release, Java FX is a project that it's got a different delivery cycle. And they did that so that they could deliver at a different cadence. They weren't tied to a release, but Java FX is still super relevant, and it still continues to move forward. If you have the opportunity to take it for a spin, I highly recommend it. Again, I said earlier in the show, I do a lot with Raspberry Pis and JavaFX. It gives me this lightweight interface that I can run on these small footprints and small devices. So yes, absolutely, take it for a spin. It's amazing. It's a great way of doing things. It's got a lot of cool stuff. And yes, and you can build games with it. There's a lot of cool stuff there. And the more I dig into it, sometimes it's hard to find. Again, there's not some bucket of information somewhere that says, hey, here's all the cool things you can do with JavaFX, but there is a ton of amazing work being done with JavaFX. Yes, it's still relevant. Take it for a spin. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, and I haven't written a whole bunch of applications in JavaFX, but whenever I see the output and like, there's some beautiful UIs being created. This is a long ways away from the days of Swing, right? So JavaFX creating these really nice interfaces, and the APIs look really nice. Like the code examples that I've seen are like, wow, yes, I would enjoy writing these types.
And they're not exclusive. Like you don't have to like choose one or the other. You can use them both. You can use all the things. These are tools that you can put in your tool belt. Use it. There was a few questions. So I started a couple of questions. We will get to those questions. Keep them coming. Again, if you come to my house for dinner and you leave hungry, that's your fault. You're here, you're live, you have awesome people in the chat that are answering questions for you, but bring your questions. Don't leave the live chat. Don't leave this live stream without asking your questions. Don't leave hungry.
Nice. All right, so we're on to Spring Boot 3.3.0 Milestone 3. This is what was released last week. There is a blog post on this, spring.io/blog, if you want to read a little bit more about it. But what's new? Prometheus metrics. So now you can use Spring Boot's auto configuration of micrometers Prometheus support. Replace your dependency on micrometer registry Prometheus with a dependency of something else there. So yeah, that's exciting. Flyway 10. This release upgrades to Flyway 10.10. Flyway 10 is more modular than previous versions and now supports several databases and has kind of moved into a number of new database-specific modules. So if you're using any of the following databases in here, you basically need to update your dependency. It's no longer just a single like Flyway dependency. You're saying, hey, I want to bring in support for Flyway database PostgreSQL, right? So that's an important change. If you're using Flyway or using one of these databases, check out the release notes for that. Infinite Span 15. This release upgrades to 15. This has raised its Jakarta EE baseline and such a number of its Jakarta modules, such as core Jakarta, no longer exist. So if you're using that, check that out. A little comment around Git commit ID in the Maven plugin. The Maven plugin has been upgraded to 8.0.x. As a part of this upgrade, the default date format has now changed. So just a small change, but good to know. Here's where we get into some exciting stuff, DaShaun.
Yes, yes.
News and noteworthy. So CDS support. I don't know a whole lot about this, but I've been hearing Sebastian talk about it since the end of last year. CDS is a JVM feature that can help reduce the startup time and memory footprint of Java applications. Spring Boot now has support for the easy creation of a CDS-friendly layout. This layout can be created by extracting the Uber jar with the help of the tools in jar mode. So the example here in the doc says java-d jar mode equals tools. Pass it a -jar, and then your application -jar extract. Have you had a chance to dive into this at all?
Yes. So this is another capability that is being introduced, class data sharing. We have this, it's a JVM capability that's going to make our startup faster, period. So just know that this is another runtime efficiency. And what we're doing here is we're making it so that you can get these benefits easier. You can take advantage of CDS easier. So there's also a blog post from, I think it was Sebastian, that came out on Thursday or Friday. So spring.io/blog, go check that out. And he's got a really good example.
Awesome.
So there are tons of benefits. I will go. Yeah, there's more on that story. And this is really addressing startup speed and performance for your Java applications. and Spring.
I just love that no matter what we're doing here, whatever types of applications we're creating, we have answers. We have answers to some of the problems that will come up in those certain types of applications. So this is exciting. And I don't know if this is the case. I don't know if so when we came out with AOT in Spring Boot 3.0, right? AOT was kind of a step after, before compilation, basically a way to look at everything and say, here, we're going to predetermine some things, right?
Yes.
That was a precondition for GraalVM native image, but it wasn't created just for GraalVM native images. It was created for other things going forward. One of which is some of the things coming in Project Layden, right?
Yeah. And so I oftentimes bundled the AOT processing with the native images as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume that this is what you're trying to do. But
Yep.
we've got feedback from our customers that just doing, I say customers, from our ecosystem, that just taking advantage of the AOT processing alone in your CI/CD process gives you performance improvements. So you have another lever to pull to get performance improvements. So where we would have done a demo of, hey, here it is with just the JVM, and here's an example using the native image, there's actually kind of a middle layer there. There's another little performance boost that you can get by doing looking at simple Maven build, go, and then doing the AOT processing before you run. And then there's, an additional piece of doing the native image. So you've got these levers. If performance is important to you, if startup time is important to you, and you're doing things at scale, you have more levers to pull, and they continue to get better every single release. So yes, awesome. There's a lot of things to take a look at. One of the other things that somebody proposed back to me last week, we were talking about at scale and how much does it matter if I'm only getting 0.2 seconds of improvement, or I'm only getting 20 megabytes of improvement by moving between Java 8 and Java 11. Like, okay, their response was, I don't have any applications that scale to 100 apps. So why would that matter to me? It doesn't really add up. But I posed the question back. How many applications do you take to production? How many at scale? If you start doing these patterns on one application and then do it again on the next application, even though you don't have any app that runs 100 instances, you've got more than 100 instances in your organization that could benefit from this.
Yeah.
So start now. There's a ton of, and it's cool. Right?
That's like me. That's like me going to you and going, "Hey, I have this new weight loss program that is going to knock 20% off of you in a matter of a couple of weeks." I think you would be like, "Yes, sign me up for that."
Sign me up. Right? There's tons of cool stuff and tons of value that we have. Yeah, we're just getting started. We are just getting started.
So 3.3.0 Milestone 3, there's a base 64 resources. So resources can now be loaded as base 64 encoded. Text values using the base 64 prefix. So the example in the docs here just has like certificate base 64 and then a base 64 string. So you get to take advantage of that. This is pretty cool. I saw this in a blog post too somewhere, I think. SBOM actuator endpoint. So the Spring Boot actuator module now includes a new SBOM endpoint. By default, this endpoint will serve metainf SBOM bomb.json or metainf SBOM application.cdx.json located in your jar. Additional configuration has also been provided in the Spring Boot starter, Spring Boot parent starter POM to make SBOM plugins easier to configure. So I thought that was pretty
How cool is this?
Yeah.
So let's talk about actuators, and I will get back to some of the other comments. Let's talk about actuators. One of the big things that we hear is like, oh, I'm nervous. I don't want actuators. One of the main things I want everybody to understand, actuators are there to help you. They are the piece that for me put me over the top around Spring Boot. I got these production quality, enterprise grade features because of Spring Boot actuators.
Yep.
And I want you to understand there are ways of protecting those actuators. Yes, there's a lot of information that can be shown in those actuators, but you can put the actuators available on different ports that hide and that are not accessible to the external world, to everybody. There are ways. please turn on these actuators, get the benefit of these actuators. How cool is it that with Spring Boot 3.3 that I can get out of the box, I can get an endpoint that says, here's my bill of materials. Here's all the stuff that I'm taking to production. I've validated it. I've got the Spring Health Assessment. All of my stuff is good. I'm in the green. I'm on the latest and greatest, and I'm patched. And not only that, here's an endpoint to prove it. That is real time. This is what's running in production. These are all the dependencies that this application depends on. How cool is that? Like,
yeah, and
that sounds like, wow, that is an amazing feature.
And as a developer, it might not be the most exciting thing, but man, for the infrastructure folks, for the security folks, this is really big.
As a developer, for me, okay, maybe I'm wearing a slightly different hat, but as a developer, when I get to go to production and I get to say, hey, look, I got this endpoint. You want to know anything about my application? Here it is. You want to ask questions? You want to have an understanding of what's going to production for my app? Boom.
That's true.
This is an amazing capability that I get just by adding an actuator, by setting a property. Boom, there it is. I'm jazzed about the future of actuators and all the benefits that we get today and all of the things that are coming. One of the things is I knew that the SBOM actuators were coming. I didn't really realize that they were going to be there. They're already in the 3.3.0 milestone. I didn't realize that they were already available. This is super exciting. And there's a lot more stuff coming.
Yep. So cool. Some dependency upgrades for projects like Spring Authorization Server, Spring Data, Spring Security, some other ones, and then just a few miscellaneous things. There have been some deprecations, so go ahead and check that out. But yeah, that's it. That's not it. That's a lot of things we've talked about through 3 milestones. And again, if we go back to Spring Calendar and we look at April and then we look at May, if we go down to May 23rd, Spring Boot 3.3.0. So still some time to like give this a test run. You know, again, part of open source is just giving it a test, you know, build an application with it, maybe include it in a branch in one of your other applications that you're using and give us some feedback. So
it works or whether it doesn't. Like, hey, these are both valid. I tried Spring Boot 3.3.0 milestone release 3 with my application that I was previously using 3.2.3. It worked. That's valid. Thank you for that feedback. It's just as valuable as I tried this release, it didn't work, and here's why. These are both valid. We want to get your feedback. You have an opportunity. I hope that you're on the latest, greatest version of Spring Boot. If you're not yet, we're here to help. We want to get you there. And if you are, how cool is it that you get to look forward to Spring Boot 3.3 and you can start to exercise and see if it's going to work for you. And you can also start to get feedback before it's released. You can say, you know what would be better? This, right? You can help decide what's happening with the Spring Boot ecosystem. How cool is that?
Agree. All right. So I think that's all the things we want to go through. We have a bunch of questions that we want to get to. So let's start going through those.
So Sod Veers, I'm guessing, trying to upgrade to Spring Boot 3.x, and we've got some JavaX .xml annotations. What's the best way to make it work? There are recipes that will convert. If you've got a library that has a dependency on that, you've got to either find the upgraded version of that library or find another library. Some libraries that we were using for the last 10 years, they are no longer supported. They don't have a version that's going to work with Java 21 or Java 17. So you're going to have to do some work, and there's not an easy button for some things. So this is my advice. Look for the upgraded version that's going to support Java 17, or look for a replacement for that library.
Yeah, and if there isn't an upgraded version of that and you have to look for a replacement, I don't think that can be a showstopper. That can't be the end goal to go, well, we tried this version, it doesn't support it.
We don't want to save money.
What are you going to do? Just stay on Java 8 forever? Like, you can't do that. So we have to find solutions. I know it sucks, but you got to find solutions to move forward.
This is the way that we're going to do things. Hopefully again, we talked about OpenRed. Hopefully these things are going to get easier as we go forward. We're learning more. But for now, like, hey, congratulations, you're here. And I love that you're moving forward. And we want to know, share more details. We're happy to hear and we're happy to help. Here's a good question. When do we choose one JDK vendor over another? Right. Mm-hmm. One thing, one size fits most, but not one size fits all. You have options and there is value. I like to say which version is supported in your organization, which version is supported. If you're running into a situation where one JVM isn't, checking the box for everything you need, you have options. That's another great thing about our ecosystem is we have options. The one that jumps out for me is like, hey, Azul has some really advanced spectral capabilities that you just don't get in the other JVMs. So there are cases where that's going to be the one that checks the box. There are several vendors. And I think what we heard in a recent State of Java was that Amazon's Corretto, because of the size of Amazon and because of where it's being distributed, that's one that they see the most, deploy the most because it's supported. When you're deploying in that environment, it makes sense to use their JDK. So my default here is figure out what's supported in your organization. And if you haven't made a decision, or if your organization hasn't made a decision, take the time to test the different JVMs and see which one works best for your use cases.
Yep.
But you don't have to do this. That's not something I think that should be constant. Find one, get support for it, and adopt one going forward. That's kind of my advice. Thoughts on that?
No, you said it great.
I was going to ignore this one, but I'm not going to, because one of the things that I do at night is I go to Twitter, I go to LinkedIn, I go to the other places, and I do a search for hashtag Spring Boot. And on Twitter, Exit or whatever it is, one of the things that I'm going to tell you, Abhishek, is search for hashtag Spring Boot. And what you're going to find is there are dozens of companies that are using hashtag Spring Boot to announce their remote jobs for Spring Boot, period. Mm-hmm. Do that.
Yeah, and a lot of the places like LinkedIn has a filter to say, hey, is this a remote job? So I think that's a really good place to start. And also, somebody asked me about this at the Atlanta Jug, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to find my next job. And I'm like, hey, you're here at the Atlanta Jug, talk to people. So, maybe going to a local Java user group or a meetup or a conference. And don't just go there and soak in some of the information. Go there and try and talk to people, make some connections. Because a lot of the jobs that I've gotten in my career have been through connections that I've made. So I think that's a really important part of our industry, right?
Keep coming back here, even here, right? Yeah. I'm fully aware that we've got people that are in our little family, our little group here, our community, that they know each other, and now they are regularly communicating about the ecosystem and about what they're finding. So keep coming back here. This is a great place to start. Here's an interesting question. Why is the Spring framework popular with enterprises and not with startups or small companies? And I don't think that is even a thing. I don't think that is a fact. I think Jitter said addressed it, where I think Spring framework, I took a startup from idea to MVP to production with multiple products. And we leveraged Spring and Spring Boot for all of the reasons that you would expect. It makes our lives easier. We get a ton of value out of it. So I'm not sure where you got this data from, but I know from my position here as a Spring developer advocate and from my history that this is false. This is not true facts.
I think, I'm just going to throw some numbers out here. Don't take them as concrete, but these are things that I've heard. There are 14 to 17 million Java developers. Java is used all over the place, in legacy applications, in large enterprises, in new startups. And Spring is, again, numbers, you can look at them, and used in 80-90% of these organizations. So Spring is everywhere. Java is everywhere. I would agree that I don't agree with that statement. So.
False, fake news. All right. Simon did add that, hey, NipFX just posted about a new game written purely in Java on Steam. Slice and dice. So, wow.
Nice. That's awesome.
That's exciting. Thank you for sharing that, Simon. And the last one that I had marked here is somebody says, hi, would you be able to point me in a direction for the authorization server? How to set this up for application credentials? I know one place to start. Spring.io there's a great pattern there that you can simply copy and paste and bring into your project. It's great. We talked about it here on stream. So we've got episodes that actually cover the authorization server, but also, there's samples. If you've got questions and you would like a little bit more help, call me. Like if you're having issues, call me. You know where to find me. I'm on the Twitters and LinkedIn and all the places. We are here to help. We are here to help you. Don't get stuck. Don't spin your wheels on something like this, because we want to help. And
yeah. And at least with the authorization server, you used to have to go into the docs and like look at this config and set up. No longer. Start that Spring.io. You can pick authorization server. All of the auto configuration, the Spring Boot starters are there. That should get you up and running really quickly. That's a good place to start. And I don't know if Spring Academy has any guides on this yet, or if they're upcoming, but Spring Academy is a good place to look. Spring.io underneath the guide, see if any's there. Go into Spring Boot's projects, look at the samples for Spring Authorization Server. Those are kind of my go-tos. And the documentation. We talk about this all the time. The Spring documentation is really good. That's a really good place to start.
Fantastic. So this has been great.
This is awesome.
Stig says, is it possible to trigger a PowerShell script from Java? Yes. Yeah, we've always had the ability to execute something from the command line.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. It's an environment executor.
Yeah, like it's part of the system, like the executor.
We've always had that ability. So absolutely yes. One of the things that I'm going to throw into your head, I want you to think about, is the Spring CLI. The new Spring CLI has an ability for you to deliver custom commands. And for things like this, where I want to execute something else that I expect to be on the environment, available on the system, I am using these Spring CLI custom commands in order to do that, so I can deliver it, with consistency across my environment.
I saw PowerShell and thought Powerball, because the lottery's gotten really big. I thought somebody wanted to write let's write a Powerball from Java to pick the winning number. That'd be awesome.
And I love Jacobus. Thank you so much. Spring Academy is definitely a great place to start. We created a repository of a bunch of places to learn about Spring on GitHub. We'll make sure that you get access to that, but github.com/spring-office-hours to get to that repository. There are a ton of resources available. We want to help you move forward.
Almost 600 stars, DaShaun. How cool is that?
This is amazing. Really, and you know what else? We are getting hundreds of visitors to this repository every single day.
That's pretty cool. All right. Well, I think that is a good place to end it, DaShaun.
This is great.
Excellent episode. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. We had a record number of people in this live stream. Yeah. Thank you to everyone who joined in the live stream and was able to contribute and ask questions and answer questions. This has just been awesome. I love seeing this community grow, and we're really grateful for all of you out there. So, hey, we will. DaShaun, what do you say if you need some help to production?
Yeah, if you get stuck on the path of production, call me. We are here to help.
There you go. All right, we have some exciting episodes coming up. We will get these scheduled out, and we will see you next Monday on the live stream at 1 p.m. Eastern. Have a great day, everyone.